to NEK-TV Rocks, and my guest today is Lila Bennett. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
What's happening with Journey to Recovery?
So Journey to Recovery, for people who don't know, is a peer support recovery center, and we're right across from the hospital. And we help people and their families, loved ones, who are struggling with any kind of substance use disorder. So everyone who works there has either gone through addiction themselves or they have a loved one who has struggled with addiction. So we have like real life experience. And we are really busy right now. We have our social detox bed where people can come and stay while they're trying to get into treatment.
How's that working? Because last time you were here, that was just about to start.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's going great. We opened that in November 2022. So a year ago and a little bit. And we have served, I think so far we've had 72 people who've come through the bed. And that's just the people we could get in, because sometimes we have more than one person who wants to come at the same time. And the average amount of time somebody stays is 4 days. The longest we've had is a 9-day stay, trying to get somebody into treatment. But the beauty of it just is that it's just improved our relationships and our stream of like the system. So we're getting people into treatment much more quickly now.
Do you have any sort of follow-up statistics for those who have used your recovery bed, gone into treatment? Has it been more helpful?
So it is more helpful. Here and now this is sort of, we're working on the next piece, is the after treatment part. So the relapse rate is really high. So people come
across the board.
They come, they use the bed, they go to treatment, they come out, and generally it's like a 90% of people who come through relapse. It's really high. But what we're seeing is the people who come and use the bed, they get introduced to recovery ahead of time, and so they know where to come after. And so the relapse isn't as bad as...
Not as long.
It's not as long. Like instead of someone just falling all the way back into addiction, they may have one slip, and then they call and they're like, hey, I need help, I need to come right back. And so we have had, I can't remember right now, but about a third of the people who have come to the bed once have come to the bed again. So the relapse, it's okay. It's better than it was without it. So that's not ideal. But you know, and sometimes the people who come and they do have to stay a little bit longer before there's a bed at treatment. It's nice because they get introduced to what we do, and they get to meet all the staff, and they get to see the groups, and they get to dip their toe in, and so they know what's there for them after, and that does help with success.
It's familiar and it's safe.
Yeah, and they know when they get out, they know where to go. They know there is support. They know that they have a team of people behind them, and so that part does work really well. But we do know that 2 weeks of treatment isn't long enough.
It's not enough.
And we don't have anything else. So like, you know, we have Valley Vista is, they're expanding their amount of time. They've been working with the state of Vermont on Medicaid reimbursement, and so they're making a little bit of progress. We get to do 17 days instead of 14 days now, which has taken a lot of work on Valley Vista in particular's part. Like sometimes I think treatment centers get a bad rap, like, oh, they don't care, you know, they only keep people for 2 weeks, and it's not like that. It's like, it's just...
Can't even make a dent in that time.
No, and it is expensive.
I know.
And right now it's mostly like traveling nurses, so it's just like the overhead is very high. There's just so much that goes into it, but we're working on that and looking at, right now we're talking with the state about what comes next. You know, how much we need more sober living, we need workforce development, we need all of these things to be able to support our people to be successful. Because it isn't just stopping using.
No, it's not. That's just the tip.
It's just
it really
the tip.
is. I used to work with a 6-month in-house residential treatment program for women in Philadelphia.
Wow, yeah.
6 months wasn't enough.
No.
It really wasn't. I mean, for some women it was fine, but for so many that was straight out and relapse, it just wasn't enough. You couldn't make enough of the other changes.
No, it really does come down to time, right? Like,
yes.
Time, it takes time, and especially now, the kinds of drugs that are accessible to so many, it changes the brain. Addiction is really, really deep. It's hard to get out of, and you need that time. And also, the trauma, the focus on trauma recovery is really important. And so that's a lot of what we're doing at Journey Recovery. Is it's not just like, okay, you have a addiction problem, you know, you're drinking too much even, or you're smoking crack, or you're shooting opiates, you know, whatever it is, there's a reason that got you there in the first place.
Right.
And so we try to really unpack all of those, the roots, the whys, and then build from there. And that does take a lot of time.
Right.
And so sometimes with our little center, where we're just like, we don't have overnight stuff for anyone except that social detox. That
one bed.
It's like racing the clock, you know, trying to get enough support around each person for them to be successful, especially when, like, people, maybe it's generational now, and so they don't know how to go to work. They were never taught how to, like, have a routine or have any purpose, or even that they're capable of it.
Right.
And so teaching people that they are indeed capable, that they can do something, that they can support themselves, that takes a lot of time too.
Right. And so often literacy skills are limited as well.
Yes.
Because school wasn't something that was either available or acceptable for whatever reason.
Yeah, and so I think that's a lot of the struggles that we have, and I think right now, like in our area, as so many people know, it's starting to feel very out of control, right?
Yes.
Like it's just, there's a lot of crime, and there's a lot of, you know, there's just a lot of chaos around the substance use problem, and that is because it is compounding, like it is generational, it is families now, and trying to get ahead of that is really difficult, because, you know, if you were raised in addiction and kind of raised in that chaos, you don't know
and
how
you've
to
never
do anything.
seen stability.
And you've never seen stability. You don't know how to create that. You wouldn't know.
Right.
And so it's like kind of that double-edged sword of, like, you know, who do we judge, or what do we do? You know, it's easy to judge the person doing it, but it's really like it's a community issue.
Addiction is a community issue.
It is a community issue, and so, you know, I think that's kind of the lens that we're coming at it from at Journey Recovery, is like trying to help the individual, but also trying to do everything we can to educate the community about what they can do, right?
Right.
And so
we just had a forum which was sort of police and law centered, and that was one piece of it, and that was fine, but clearly there needs to be more, and I know other forums are being planned. Something that focuses on what the community can do, because there has to be a community response. It can't just be, let's call the cops, because that doesn't work.
Right. You know, I think one thing that the community could do, you know, what's hard is that there is not an immediate answer.
Right.
And I think we all need to understand that like, we can't just, like, you know, make a change like that this is kind of a systemic thing. And so we do have a coalition. We have the One Prevention Coalition, and if anybody watching this wants to be involved in that, they can reach out to me.
Great.
Because that's about, like, community outreach and community education. And that's one piece of what we all can do as community members. The other thing is, we need a better system. We need a whole better system, and we all need to be aware of what that means. And so, like, one thing that we are doing right now as a group is the nursing home that's for sale right next door. We're creating a work group around that. We're talking with the state of Vermont. We are collaborating with, like, Northeast Kingdom Human Services, Umbrella, Jenna's Promise in Johnson, to maybe buy that building and create an actual program where you stay for longer. It's a 6 months to 1 year program where we can bring people from treatment and also from Department of Corrections, because what's happening right now is, say you're incarcerated for a drug-related crime, but you're not a violent person. You come from generational addiction, you don't know how to go to work, you've never been taught anything except that's survival. What we would like to do is take those individuals and teach them how to live with purpose, how to go to work, how to take care of themselves, how to take care of each other, and then get them out into the community, into the workforce, and instead of having to just be struggling, drawing on the system, they're going to be able to contribute as taxpayers, which feels really good as a person. Does. So that's, I think we're going to need community support, we're going to need funding, we're going to need people to get behind that. That is one thing that as a community we can do. I think another thing that we can do is understand that our police are really up against a very difficult situation, and they are trying really hard, and what we see is police working hard to be good protectors of the community, to treat people with dignity, and get the training that they need. And that's a lot to ask of our police force. And there
aren't enough of them to do that.
No, and we are managing, because of Vermont's rural nature, we do have drug trafficking coming from more populated cities and areas coming here, because it is a little bit easier, because of the rural nature, and so that puts even more stress on our little police forces. And so, I think our police are really trying to figure out how to absorb this, and it's really easy to look from the outside and be like, man, they don't do anything. But
they also have to follow the law.
They do. And there's other task forces working. So there's we have the New England High Intensity Drug Task Force, and they are looking at the pockets of dealers who are coming, and how to understand where and how and who, and it's not like anybody gets to overstep anybody else. And so like any other system, it's really messy, and it's everything is a moving process. And so
one of our state representatives at the forum that happened last week ended his bit with a plea to lock people up and throw away the key, and it was, that's really not the solution.
No, it isn't. But
you got to cheer for it, so that thought is out there.
Well, I think one thing that is hard, right, is for an example, a good example is when we first started working with the hospital, and we would go in, somebody had an overdose. And nurses in an emergency department are trained to be able to take action and save a life immediately, right? So if somebody has a heart attack, they can give them nitroglycerin, or whatever you do.
Whatever they need to do.
Boom, they save that person's life. And then you have somebody with a substance use disorder come in, and it doesn't work that way. You cannot save their life in that moment. I mean, you could give them Narcan, but then it's a much bigger problem. And you can't always fix that whole problem.
No.
And so it gives this feeling of hopelessness. So when we came in with our detox bed, it immediately like bolstered morale all the way around, because then the nurses could call us and be like, hey, we have a person.
We got one.
We did what we can do.
Yeah, he's all yours.
She's
all
yours.
Yeah.
And so then we get to take over, and it makes everybody feel like we're doing something.
Yes.
And
True.
when you're a community member who feels like you cannot do anything and you're watching this, you do get angry, and you do want answers, and you want people locked up, and you want consequences, and that is actually really fair.
Absolutely.
It's fair. And I think one thing that we get confused about with all of this is like the messaging, right? Like, okay, substance use disorders, from people who don't know how to go to work, and there's trauma, and there's this, and there's that, and all of that is true, and we do need to be compassionate, but on the other side, there needs to be accountability. And I think what happens is people who aren't on the front lines don't see the accountability side, and they think we're all just like, oh, let's just be gentle and
kumbaya.
Yeah.
Right.
and so that does feel very frustrating, especially I think for like small business owners who are getting robbed.
Yes.
And they're people who are just trying to pay their bills like the rest of us, and they're the ones who are really, really being affected, and they don't have staff because nobody feels safe, and they don't want to work, and all of that stuff. Like, all of that is real, and I think that's what we have to be doing now, is figuring out what is the right level of accountability to get ahead of this. And I don't think we know the answer to that yet. And that's why it feels so yucky, because
You're right.
the reality is we're trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And we don't have adequate resources in things like healthcare or housing, particularly housing.
So like, say we could just be like, okay, this person is using drugs, they're involved in the wrong thing, they're going to go to treatment, and then they're going to go to this facility where they're going to learn this thing, and then the community starts to...
And then there'll be a sheltered job kind of training.
Right. And
but we don't have it.
We don't have that. But that's what we need. And that will create like that whole chain of accountability as well.
Yes.
And so that's what I think we need to be focusing on, is sort of like, okay, compassionate accountability and creating a system of care that can support that. And that isn't an overnight thing, and it's hard.
But we are small enough in northern Vermont to be able to test drive a program like that.
We are small enough, and so I think that's why this idea is getting some traction, is because we have this facility. It's empty right now. It's right next to the current Journey to Recovery. Journey to Recovery is outgrowing, our little space, our groups.
You only just moved in there.
I know, we just moved in. It's been 3 years already, but the group room it's getting too small.
Wow.
And, which is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
And, one thing that we're noticing is people have success when there is that community, and there's more and more people doing the same thing. And addiction is naturally isolating. It kind of makes you shame yourself into just being alone and small. And so the more we can grow this community and create a robust support network of a ton of people being in recovery, it's going to help.
That nursing home, I think, was a 40-bed.
60.
60. Wow. Wow.
Yep, it's 60 beds. So there's a lot of opportunity to create a very functional, very innovative program there, and we're working on it. And I don't have the answers for what that means yet, except that it's happening.
That's actually really exciting.
Yeah. And we don't have a fundraising page set up for it yet, but we will.
But you will.
But we will.
Do you have a time frame in your head that you're willing to share?
That's hard to say. I mean, obviously...
You could start small.
If we could start small, we would start within 6 months, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we won't hit that, but I think within a year it would be pretty amazing, and I think we probably will see some stuff happening. That's kind of the goal at the moment. That kind of leads me into the other pieces of the work that Journey to Recovery is doing, as we are looking at this mess, right? Of like people who are struggling. I forget that I'm old now, And
well, not from where I sit,
no.
but hey.
But when you're looking at like the majority of the people who are coming in to get treatment were born in like 1990.
Yes.
And
or later, a lot later.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, I am really old because I was in high school then, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but what that means also is that they have young children.
Yeah.
We have people who are struggling who have young children. And so when I started to kind of track parents, how many of our people were parents, it's 90% of the people are parents. Right. And so we realized that we needed to get into schools and we needed to get at these kids. Yeah. We needed to talk to them. We need to help them. And so we started in 2022. We embedded peer recovery coaches in North Country High School.
Right.
And we've since expanded that program from North Country. We are in Lake Region High School now, and we're also at Coventry Middle School, and we will be within the month, we'll be also doing work at Newport City. And so what we found, like just a little snapshot of data, is in September 2022, when our very first month doing any kind of prevention and early intervention in North Country, we had 30 interactions with kids. And in September 2023, we had 250 interactions with kids. In December of 2023, just recently, we had 491 interactions with kids. So, and in the first year we were there, we had 49 kids who were like caught. You know, they were vaping, they were drinking, they were smoking pot, whatever they were doing. And then this year, now they have gotten sneakier, I will say.
Of course they have. They're creative.
They're creative. We've only caught 19 kids doing things, but we've had, as of January, we had 79 kids who came to us all on their own and saying, hey, I need you, like, how can you help me with, you know, a lot of the time it's family members, but it's also vaping. And so we kind of have flipped the script from like, before kids were vaping and it was really cool and everybody was doing it, and now they're asking for help to stop. They don't want to do it anymore. They see how addicted they are, and they're asking for help. And so, you know, the prevention work in the school is so powerful, and a lot of what we do is similar stuff to what happens with peer coaching with adults, except that we talk a lot about attachment theory and like how you relate to people. Why are you relating to someone? Why do you constantly need a boyfriend? Why are you doing this? And giving those answers to those whys, allowing them to ask themselves their whys, it's life-changing. And it's the best prevention, because they actually are like armed with education for what, you know, their root causes, maybe before they're even starting, or right at the beginning of why they're going down a risky path. And it's really helping. We have a number of kids. We have one yesterday, was her 7-month off of crack cocaine.
Whoa.
Yeah, so because we have kids using real drugs.
Yes, I'm sure.
Here. And so that is also, you know, that coupled with this other work, we're really trying to like change the trajectory of the substance use disorder in our community. You know, and prevention isn't something you can track so easily.
No.
It's really difficult, but you know, in 5 years, we're hoping that we'll see less crime and less drugs in the area. You know, we'll see.
Yeah, it's hard to measure, because when you prevent something, you don't have a number at the end.
You don't.
Yay! That's what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
So it is hard, and I think the problem with this stuff is that we all want like those knee-jerk reactions. We want answers. We want this to be different. We want it right now. It's scary.
It's a process.
And it is a process.
Yeah.
A slow one.
It's really nice driving past the high school and seeing the signs outside. And that's a message. You know, it's a message for anybody going past, anybody going in, and knowing what those signs are, because they're big and clear.
They are. They are. And it's, you know, I have to give a lot of credit to Chris Young and North Country High School for being so innovative, being willing to try this. You know, this is a really different approach than's ever been done before, to just have actual recovery coaches in the school.
Yeah. We also have a school superintendent who's interested. And
Yes, she
wants to be.
Is so supportive of this and understands it.
Yes, she does.
And I think it makes a tremendous difference just to have leadership behind this kind of really tricky work.
Yes.
And it is uncomfortable, and you know, I think it's also we're figuring out how to do this in a way that feels safe. So because parents who have substance use disorder are going to feel threatened.
Of course.
And you know, we recognize that, and so we come at this work with that in mind, so that nobody feels attacked.
Right. And then there's other parents who think this couldn't possibly apply to anybody in my family. Don't come near my kids, because you're encouraging them.
Yes. Right. It's kind of like, you know, the message of if you talk about suicide, it makes people suicidal.
You'll want to jump off the roof.
Yeah.
Wrong.
And that is not it at all. And every
not.
single one of us, no matter who you are, can benefit from understanding substance use disorder.
Yes.
Every single one of us. And every single one of us knows somebody. I do not care who you are.
At least one of us. One or more.
Who has struggled with substances at some point in their life. Maybe it doesn't mean that they're a full-blown alcoholic, but they may have had some problem drinking.
Yes.
You know, and I think now with the vaping, it's just so pervasive because it's such a confusing, and with the legalization of cannabis, it's very confusing for kids. You know, some people say that it helps your anxiety and your depression, and your parents are doing it, and now everybody can kind of talk about it. That's a very confusing message, and you know, that's could be a whole nother.
That's a really tough one because it was never useful keeping it in the closet.
Right.
Or keeping anything in the closet for that matter.
No.
But I mean, we'll leave the cannabis one for now because
it's like a whole different
discussion. Yeah.
But I think
vaping is a real challenge.
It is. Vaping is a big gateway, and then it makes it easier for kids to try other things. And also with the flavors, it kind of gives that message of like that it's not as bad for you, and maybe it's even good for you. You know.
Yeah.
And so for
of course,
kids,
that was the message with cigarettes when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Hey, they're good for you. They calm you down.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and now we know that's not true.
Right.
And now the marketing is like, just vape. Cigarettes are yucky. And that is just absolutely not true. And what it's doing is it's opening the door much earlier. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that kids who are disclosing, if they try a vape within 6 months, they're trying something else.
Yes.
Because it's opening that pathway in their brain. And the brain is so susceptible when it's developing when you're a kid or a teen.
Right.
And so we're seeing, you know, really big changes in brain chemistry in kids who are vaping, and then especially going on and trying THC. It's like the joy receptors in the brain get very confused.
Sure.
And so teens are able to get addicted to vape, to nicotine and THC in a way that is very different than the way that adults become addicted. And so,
and how can it be so bad when you're puffing out a cloud of strawberry scented smoke, which is what I actually smelled the other day. It was really gross.
Yeah, but in the bathroom, you know, when the popular kid has the vape and then you kind of want to fit in, you know.
And it's so easy to be discreet with it too. I've seen people in restaurants surreptitiously have a little puff.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really harmful, and you know, it is damaging to the actual brain. And so that's what we talk to the kids about too.
Right.
You know, and that because it's messing up your stress pathway. You know, you're not learning how to absorb stress in a healthy way.
How to learn some coping skills.
No.
Right. And I mean, that's compounded because you can't turn on the TV now without a whole load of pharmaceutically based ads, all of which are saying, oh, you need this, you need this. So the message that's being pounded in is, you can't possibly do this on your own. You need some kind of chemical support, whether it's a pill that's prescribed, which is expensive, or it's just a little puff of your vape pen.
Yep. And that none of that's really bad for you.
Right.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, then that ties into a lot of social media and phones and like the dopamine that you get from scrolling and likes and you know, TikTok and all of that stuff. I mean, and that goes for adults too, is, you know, we've like created this instant gratification culture, whether it's substances or social media or whatever it is, and it's very dangerous, and it is changing our brains and our ability to cope with things and know ourselves. And getting to know ourselves is not something that is really, you know, I think it's changing. I think that we're trying to come back to that, get to know who you are and why. But with all of them, you know, I mean, you can put a filter on your photo, and it's all kind of the same. It's the same dysfunction, which is really dangerous, and it all plays into it, and whether it's kids or adults. So that's a lot of what we do, is talk about that stuff and like talk about the science behind it.
Right.
You know, people really do appreciate understanding what's actually happening in their body. And that gives you...
It's interesting.
It is interesting.
Fascinating,
It's
actually.
fascinating, and it's fascinating for every single person.
Yes.
There's,
Exactly.
you know, lots of people are like, I'm not good at school, don't talk to me about that. And then when you start to kind of break it down, that they're like, oh, actually, I do understand.
Right.
Like, yes, you do, because you are smart.
And you're relating school subjects to real life,
Yes.
which is so much more fun than just sitting in a classroom.
Yes. Yes. We've been working a little bit with the health classes and doing some of that science stuff. We're going to start working with the chemistry classes in Lake Region, and that's also just going to be so fun because it's real.
Yes.
And that's what they'll remember. So.
Yeah. Does Lake Region have a police presence in the school too? Because I know we do. And obviously the police presence here is going to be really supportive of what you guys are doing.
We work very closely with
Royce.
Royce, yes. And it's just it's a wonderful collaboration.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, like he's a resource for the kids, and they trust him, and they're truthful with him.
Yes.
And it's not punitive. There's no... I think that's the thing that we're doing with the kids that is working. It's like, it's not punitive, but there is accountability. So like, if you get caught with something, you are going to be suspended, and you are going to have to meet with Journey to Recovery at least 5 times. And it depends on the infraction, you know? And we have a system, and we have a program for what we do with each of those students. And, you know, so it's not like, it's not just a punishment. It's not based around shame. It's based around education. And that's what works. And that's what we need to do with the adults.
How many staff do you have now?
We are small but mighty.
You always were.
There's 7 of us.
Wow.
Yep.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's very fulfilling, and our team, I think we've developed a team that's very solid.
Yeah.
And 2 of our staff have come through the program. We've been there long enough now. We have 2 people on staff who came to us in active addiction and worked their whole, you can't start working until you're a year.
Right.
And so they've worked their whole year, and then they went through the training, and then they became coaches, and they're really effective coaches because it worked for them.
And probably some of the kids and other adults remember them from the street.
They do, and a lot of the times they'll say, like, well, if she can do it, I can do it. If he can do it, I can do it. You know, and it gives that immediate hope when you meet someone in the hospital. And
Yes,
you know, and
exactly. I've been here, I've done this, and look at me now.
Yep.
And 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do this.
No, 2 years ago, you know, I mean, and it's really great too, because we also have that really frontline experience, you know. A lot of times, especially right now, desperate people do desperate things.
Right.
And having people who have really come through and done their own desperate things, it allows for another level of accountability where we can call out bullshit too.
Which is fabulous.
You know, and be like, no, actually, you don't need that. And, you know, we have these coaches who are like, well, I said that too.
Yeah.
You know, I used to say that too, and no. And, you know, and so it just creates, and everybody actually likes being called out on their shit.
It's true.
At the end of the day, you know, they do.
And now you have people who are back
Excuse my language.
I've heard it before. Now you have people who are back in the real world, who now have responsible jobs again, who are earning a living, supporting themselves.
Yes.
Who've still got some involvement with your program or not, but who everybody knows because they knew them before.
Yes.
And it's, wow, that's amazing.
Right. And that's a whole other conversation, but like getting people contributing to the community is that's the goal.
Right.
And then also having recovery coaches who were on the streets coming back, and now they're earning a really good living.
Exactly.
They are driving their own car. They pay all their own bills.
Yep.
They're raising their kids. You know, it sends a big message that recovery is possible, and it's cool.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's a lot of the work that we do.
And we're out of time.
Okay.
So thanks so much for coming back in, and I really look forward to when you take over. I'm acting as if this is definitely going to happen.
I hope it is.
The nursing home facility, that would be fabulous. Come back and talk about it.
Okay, I sure will.
Thank you.